Hi, my name is Faye, and you're listening to the Behind the Fic podcast, a podcast that asks questions to fic writers and lets them say their fic out loud and makes them feel special and all those happy things. Really cool. My co-host today is Owlheart, who you've all met if you've listened to this podcast before, but who is my guest?
All right, do I talk now?
Yes.
Okay, hi, my name is Quill, and my writing alias online is Quill 333, and I write Breath of the Wild fanfics.
Yes, you do. Say that with more pride.
Which is kind of a given.
And she's a very good writer. Today we're going to be talking about her fic called Scarlet Carnations, which I'm only now just getting the symbolism of as I say it out loud. Oh my gosh. It's a very good fic. We're only going to be this time the snippet that's read aloud is pre-recorded, so we'll just be kind of I'll just splice it in, but you guys don't need to know the editing. So how about that?
Yeah.
So the recording today, what are the trigger warnings in it, and are there trigger warnings at all?
Well, let's see. In this recording, there'd be no self-harm yet. There's death, murder, loss, trauma, blood and gore, mentions of organized crime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just a snippet of Scarlet Carnations. If you want to read the full fic, the description will be in the link will be in the description below. And after the recording plays, we will be discussing the entirety of the fic. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then pause the video and go read the entirety of the fic. If you don't care, you just want to hear us talk nonsense, and that's cool too. So, without further ado, we'll listen to the recording.
A deafening blast jolted me out of my slumber. I snapped upright. As a member of law enforcement, I was painfully familiar with the sound of a gunshot, and that was exactly what I just heard. I strained my ears with bated breath, trying to hear of my own thundering heartbeat. Loud, frantic footsteps raced down creaky wooden stairs. Then a terrified scream filled the halls of my childhood home. I tore away the sheets and rushed to where the scream seemed to have come from. When I reached the parlor was when I stumbled upon the scene. There, right at the foot of my mother's memorial, was my godmother's cold, lifeless corpse. Kneeling beside her was her granddaughter, Paya, weeping into her open palms in shock. Only a minute or two had passed since I'd awoken at the sound of gunfire. "Wait here," I ordered, then made a break for the front entrance, the nearest and most instinctual escape route. But when I threw the doors open, there wasn't a soul to be found. I returned to the parlor with my tail between my legs. Then my toe hit something heavy and metallic that clacked underfoot. When I looked down and saw what it was, I froze. With caution, I ever so slowly stepped away from the weapon. "Great," I muttered, seeing as now it would have my toe prints on it. But the longer I looked at it, I realized I'd seen this revolver somewhere before. Then it hit me. It hit me like a 2-ton train car. I quickly made sure Paya's head was turned. Then with terribly trembling hands, I did what I had to do and carefully tucked it away in my nightgown. I'd feared the precinct wouldn't allow me to participate in the investigation, seeing as I'd been on the scene at the time of the crime. However, it seemed they trusted me enough to even appoint me as the lead investigator. Granted, I had done a lot to earn their trust over the past 3 years, but this was unheard of. Nevertheless, I decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth. The next morning at 7 o'clock sharp, I returned to the scene of the crime, equipped with all the necessary tools of my trade. I looked out the window of the cramped police buggy at our destination in utter astoundment. There were already droves of officers there, awaiting the arrival of me and my partner. The sight of the place I'd once called home being chained off and hidden from the public like this was jarring, to say the least. Of all the strange crime scenes I'd seen, this was the strangest. I never could have imagined I'd be returning here not to eat Auntie Impa's delicious pork buns or to hear Auntie Purah talk about her latest technological endeavors, but for work. How could I have? "Zelda! Good morning!" greeted a rather skittish Paya when she opened the door for us. "Good morning, Paya." She nearly lost her smile when she noticed Constable Fury standing beside me. "Please, come in!" She stepped aside, and he and I entered into the low-ceilinged yet stately vestibule, removing our shoes and leaving them by the door. "Can I get either of you anything? Some tea, maybe?" My assistant opened his mouth, but I raised a hand, silencing him. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary. We have important business to take care of." Oh, yes, of course. Silly me," she chortled. "I'll let you get to it then." The first order of business was to examine the body. In most cases, a specialist would be needed to perform an autopsy, but unlike most inspectors, I had the forensic know-how to take care of it myself. One might have said this was a side effect of my hobbies and my avid interest in all things related to science that I'd harbored since grade school. However, a full autopsy, complete with the weighing of the body and the removal of the organs, would come later. For now, it would suffice to determine two simple things: the time of death and the cause of death. But before I could even get close to the body, I was stopped by my assistant, who grabbed me gently by the arm.
"You don't have to do this,"
he uttered in his typical mousy tone.
"I can call for someone else to come and take care of it for you."
The look of real and profound concern, seated deep in his aquamarine eyes, pulled at my heartstrings. It had been a year, roughly, since he'd first begun working under me. He was always so worried for me, and I always felt terrible because of it. I unhooked his hand from my arm, putting on a warm smile. "I'll be okay, Link." He looked at me as if to ask,
"Are you sure?"
"Really, it's fine. Don't worry," I insisted. "Thank you, though." This finally got him to return my smile, albeit only briefly. I already had a decent estimate of the time of death. The period we were looking at was between 10:30 at night, when the last person awake, which had just so happened to be me, had gone to bed, and 3 in the morning, when the gunshot had given me that rude awakening. Really, I should have examined the body as soon as I discovered it. In most other cases I worked on, I even wished I'd been the first on the scene, before the stiff had yet to even go stiff. Of course, the one time I happened to be one of the first to discover a murder, it had to be like this. And yet, until I knew who was responsible for this atrocity, grieving could wait. Right off the bat I could tell that this had been a homicide. This may have seemed obvious to someone like Paya, but as a detective, I'd had to forcefully train myself to assume nothing and question everything. Based on the characteristics of the hole running straight through her neck, however, I determined that the gun had been shot from too far a distance for it to have been suicidal. Auntie Impa's arms simply weren't long enough. But for a death caused by hemorrhage from a severed jugular vein, there was a shockingly small amount of blood. The rush-woven mat beneath her was nearly spotless, and I knew from experience how difficult it was to get stains out of these mats. Even when I checked underneath the mat, there was still nothing. No blood and no bullet. With a final nod, I stood up and signaled the other officers to take the body away. "Now let's see here," I said to myself, scanning the area immediately surrounding the corpse before approaching my mother's altar. But when I laid eyes on the damage it had sustained, I stumbled back. Though she hadn't been a follower of the same faith held by the Shikas, my mother's memory had been enshrined here because, like myself, they'd been like a second family to her. With all due caution, I picked up what remained of her photograph. The glass was shattered, and a bullet had completely erased her face. If this wasn't a sign of the Yeager organization, I didn't have a clue what was. Who else would have borne such ill will toward Hilda Hyrule, the town's beloved last mayor who'd been dead ever since the tragic accident at City Hall 18 years prior? That massacre had been what had ushered in their age of power, and with no one left to stand in their way, they'd been terrorizing the city ever since. Before I'd even had the chance to begin my analysis, I heard Paya's timid footsteps shuffling up to me. "Zelda," she whispered, obnoxiously tapping her finger on my shoulder.
"Excuse me."
I turned my head and forced a grin. "What is it?"
I didn't know he'd be accompanying you today."
I didn't even have to follow her gaze to know who she was eyeing. I suppressed a sigh. "Constable Fury is my partner," I reminded her politely. "I take him with me on all of my investigations."
"Yes, I know, but..."
Now her gaze was nervously flitting back and forth between me and Link.
"I wasn't prepared to see him again after so long. What if he says something to me?"
"He won't," I huffed. "Now, if you don't mind..."
"Oh my, I'm so sorry,"
she fretted.
"I'll get out of your hair."
I gave her a nod of the head in thanks, and she kindly stepped back and out of my space. But even after that, I could still feel her intense stare from across the room. I let out the sigh I'd been holding in. Sure, Paya was irritating, and I was going on maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep at most, but there was no excuse for me to be irrational, especially since it would get me nowhere in my line of thinking. What I wouldn't have done for a nice hot cup of chamomile at that moment. Based on the extreme angle of the bullet's trajectory, one could tell at a glance where the shooter had to have been positioned. They'd have been standing above the altar with very little space between the two. Definitely not enough for an entire person. Therefore, the bullet that had taken the victim's life had to have been a different one. This was backed up by the absence of any blood around the hole or anywhere else on the shrine. So why had I only heard one gunshot that night? And where in the world was the bullet responsible for Auntie Impa's death if not on the scene of the crime? After photographing the hole and scribbling my thoughts and observations down in my notebook, I began the procedure of extracting the bullet from the altar. This was a delicate task, one that I admittedly had a hard time trusting anyone else in the force with. Once I'd succeeded in retrieving the bullet, I determined it was of the same caliber as the one that had passed through the victim's throat, meaning it was likely that it had been fired from the same gun. Unfortunately, all these facts corresponded with the weapon I'd found on the scene mere hours ago, 2 chambers of which were empty. There may have been no prints left on the trigger, but even so, I simply didn't have it in me to run a striation comparison. Standing up straight and taking a quick, deep breath, I turned to my assistant, who seemed to be investigating the mantelpiece. "Right then, Fury." He turned his head as I approached him. "Anything to report?"
No, madam.
He replied solemnly, avoiding my gaze and peering straight ahead over the top of my head. "Is that so?" I tapped the end of my pen against my chin habitually. "We seem to have a dreadfully diligent killer on our hands." I gave the room another once-over from where I stood beside him. "You've been thorough in your search as always, I presume?"
Of course.
"And you found nothing? Not even a fingerprint?"
No, I'm afraid not.
"Then let's move on," I sighed, turning toward the doorway leading out into one of the building's many corridors. He followed, just a few paces behind me. "There's something I've been wanting to check since we got here."
Break the Wild
Yeah.
elevator music remix.
Elevator music plays, and then we're back. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask the Tumblr submitted question first because
Okay.
it's very relevant. I don't know if I said it when we were recording, but this was an amazing fanfic to read. I read the fics for this podcast like either the day of or the day before just to have it fresh in my mind.
Mm.
And after a while reading this, it was so captivating and such good writing and world building. It was really amazing. And like I've been following you on Tumblr, and I've liked your works, but this is just something like I didn't know you were capable of this level of writing. And I was just like, wow.
Thank you so much.
So the Tumblr submitted question for today is, for mystery writers, did you plan out what clues and foreshadowing you would drop during the story, or did you let some of it flow on its own? Also, did you always know what the answer would be?
All right. Well, about the clues and planning ahead part, I did do a lot of outlining. Well, my initial idea was for. Well, actually, I don't really remember what my initial idea is, but anyway, I did do a lot of planning, and most of it I had already done. Like I planned out and like what clues I would give and when. But the thing about the Sheikah slate was a little
Kind of like on the spot.
Yeah, I'm still not really sure like if it works.
Oh, it does.
But like, okay.
But like mostly you planned it out, and from the beginning you knew where it was going.
Yes. That is true.
Okay. So I guess I'll ask my first question. As difficult as it is to translate a strictly fantasy-based franchise into reality, you did it very well. What was your process for this translation, and what obstacles did you find and overcome?
Well, the obstacles didn't really have much to do with the world building so much as like the characters and like the relationships in canon.
Right.
So like I had a bit of a time figuring out like which characters I would even include and like how they would relate to each other in this AU. Like,
but I mean, you say that, but like the end result is just such a fitting. All the characters just fit so well
I'm so glad.
into what you've created, and as far as the relationships go as well. So it's very clear that a lot of hard work was put into it.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
definitely true. But
Yeah.
like, for example, with like Impa and Purah, like in canon, they're pretty much the same age as Zelda. But I made them like what
Older.
would be, like her grandmother.
Yeah. Al, do you have a question?
I do. So do you prefer writing the mystery or the romance part of it?
Well, actually, I hadn't really written any mystery before this, so this was a really new experience for me. It's very difficult. But it was really fun, and I don't know if I could choose between the two. But then again, I don't know if I'd want to write it if it didn't have the romance in it.
Yeah.
You always gotta have your side plot of romance.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that for myself, and just like I don't think I look forward to the romance in a story. Or like writing myself. I was like, oh, where's the romance?
Exactly. I need that.
The Link has ruined me in a good way.
Sorry, what was that?
The Link has ruined me in a good way.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question is a bit less serious, but if you were to pinpoint a decade in which this takes place, which one would it be?
1920s.
1920s. I like that. Okay.
That was the idea.
That's so
That was a very
Now I'm imagining them all in like the 20s attire, and then like
Yeah, it was supposed to be like 1920s UK.
Okay.
Sort of
I mean,
thing.
I apologize if I just missed that, but I was.
That's
For me,
okay.
it was kind of in a. It just read as a different version of reality. Like it was obviously it's an AU, but it didn't read so much as like historical fiction. This is the real world. It was just kind of like there's a little bit of a difference to it in comparison to the real world, and I liked that.
Yes.
But at the same time, I was like, this is such a good story and such a human story that it could fit in any decade. So I just wanted to wonder what I was wondering, like what we're going for. But 20s, I love that decade.
Yeah, that was actually something I was trying to avoid. You'll notice I never actually said the name of the town. I always just said like the town or the city. So I was trying to veer off like cementing it in either reality or a fictional universe.
I think I didn't even notice that you did that, so I really think that you balance the audience's imagination and specificity really well.
That's good to hear.
Because I don't know, something about your writing, like it was just really solid and cemented, and it just kind of worked. I don't know how to describe it. Al, do you have another question?
Yeah. Are there any Easter eggs that you wrote that you think would be easy to miss?
Easter eggs. I don't know if I put in any Easter eggs. Well, like, in terms of, like, canon Breath of the Wild, anyway. But, there was one thing, it was more of a symbolism sort of thing. The reason I picked carnations as, like, the main symbolic thing for this fic is because in the language of flowers, apparently carnations symbolize motherhood.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anyone would catch that.
I
don't know anything about flowers, though.
I didn't catch it. I mean,
So yeah, I mean,
I could have looked it up and it would have been, but that's a really interesting detail.
yeah,
And
I mean,
that's within the context of the story. That's so like ironic, you know,
yeah.
because of what happened
Mm-hmm.
in conjunction with the Carnations, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, if you
Yeah.
happen to know the language of the flowers and stuff like that, and you
Yeah.
spotted that cookie for you,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Or they're listening to this podcast and now they know.
Yes.
I think. Wait, did Owlie just ask a question?
Yes, that was my question.
Okay. So, one of the many things this fic excels in is world building. Blah, blah, blah. There's so many details put into it that I can't help but wonder if there are any details that didn't make it into the fic.
Details. Well, actually, I planned out quite a bit of like the floor plan sort of thing of the manor, the Sheikah Manor,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't really put in all that detail without
Right.
boring the hell out of my readers. But yeah, I had the whole floor plan figured out. And there was, yeah.
I just kept imagining it as like my mind instantly went to what it knows, which is the house in Kakariko.
Yeah.
And I think whenever you mention it being a manor, I think my mind just automatically just made it like a bigger, you know. But so
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the
So,
idea.
but as far as the architecture, like I kept going back to like kind of that wooden Sheikah style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just basically that, but with more rooms.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really good. Al, do you have any more questions?
Just one more.
Okay.
So you mentioned that like this is your first time writing mystery. Do you read a lot of mystery, or did you have to do like a lot of research for this?
Well, I don't read a lot, but I've played a lot of mystery type games like Ace Attorney and Professor Layton. You've heard either of those. But there's been a lot of inspiration that went into this, definitely outside of Breath of the Wild, that's for sure. If you've played Ace Attorney, like one of my other writer friends has, and she pointed it out, you'll notice right away.
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
It's so good. Oh my god.
The talk, the way like in the court scenes, I don't know, it just the way you wrote the court scenes, that you seemed like you knew what you were talking about. I mean, I'm not doubting that you know what you're talking about, but it's just like being a writer. Sometimes you just don't know much about like. Let's say you're writing a scene where someone has this illness, but you don't know how much about the illness, so you got to do a little research. You really did your homework. It seemed like you really did your homework for like how the courtroom works and how things can be corrupted and how people talk, and even though Revali does talk like that, like how well that fits into being a lawyer,
Yeah, exactly.
a defense attorney, whatever.
Yeah.
I just think that every single part of your fic was well researched and believable, and yet amazingly creative.
Thank you so much.
I feel like we have extra time, so honestly, I could just talk about this fic. It just
Okay. Don't let me stop you.
because I'm out of my questions that I wrote down, but I'm sure I come up with questions on the spot.
Okay.
I loved the amnesia bit, not the bit, but like the part that talked about how he was in an asylum and that's what like caused kind of this barrier between him and Zelda. But I just think that fits so well within Breath of the Wild, because it's just like, well, yeah, that's perfect, you know.
Yeah.
In like the translation between like Breath of the Wild and this 100 years, and then the amnesia, like in the real world, like, oh, he was in this asylum. He didn't remember Zelda. Zelda got him out when she finally found him.
Yeah.
I think that was really great.
Thank you. I'm really proud of that too.
Yeah. So big spoilers. So pause the video. the mother being alive
Mhm.
and part of the Yiga clan was a surprise for me, but it was like a good surprise. It was like, oh, the twist.
Yes. When I thought of that, I had the same reaction.
Yeah. What was like, where did that decision come from? Because I know as a writer, like we all have those aha moments, but
Mhm.
was there anything in Breath of the Wild in particular that spurred that on, or did you just kind of like, think like, oh gosh, what if this? That'd be so cool. I don't know.
Well, actually, I was trying to. I ran into the problem of like I didn't have like this figurehead for the Yiga clan, or I mean the Yiga organization. So I needed to come up with like a leader for it, and the only person aside from like Master Koga, which seemed a little not serious enough for this fic, was her mother.
Right.
And so like I was like, at first I was like, maybe not, but the more I thought about it, it like sank in. Like, oh my god, this could be really good.
It just really clicked, and it made it that much more emotional when everything got even more interconnected. Like, her mother's responsible for Impa's death, but then her mother's also responsible for the death of Link's family, and then Link is responsible for the death of her mother, and it's just like this whole interconnected web of like a mess, but a good mess. Like
A lot of murder.
Oh yeah.
But
this is a very murder-heavy fic.
It's one of those messes in stories where it's like you're enthralled by it. Like it's just like, the drama. Oh. And then in the end, when Link and Zelda gets together, it's like, okay, they're starting to heal.
Yeah.
From all the bad that has happened in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And all the high school, like the little scenes in high school, I'm just like, oh, you guys don't know what you're in for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
I just wanted that sort of contrast from like the bleak reality of the present day.
Yeah.
I thought that would add to it a bit.
Definitely. Yeah, now, like, I remember seeing it on Tumblr, like, Scarlet Carnations, and I was like, yeah, I'll get to that sometime. And then I finally read it today, and I'm like, I have been depriving myself of something amazing.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it that much.
I really did like it. I'm not gonna read all your other. I mean, I read some of your other works, but like not enough apparently.
Okay.
Okay, so Quill's information will be in the bio below. Interject. That's a bio. Quill's information will be in the description below. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
As well as the link to her fake Scarlet Carnations, which is very good. Hopefully, you have read it by this point because I just spoiled like big parts of it. Owlheart's information and my information will be in the description. Honestly, since we didn't do like the live recording, I have no idea what time we're at as far as this episode. So I'll just ask a couple more questions.
We've only been on the call for like 24-ish minutes.
But then usually the recording takes like
the reading
10 minutes.
can be a while.
Yeah.
It's like 9.5 minutes.
9.5 minutes? Okay, that's not bad. I'll probably just ask you a couple more questions and then we'll end off.
Right.
Just like ending off questions. So Quill, what works in progress can you talk about?
Well, actually, going back to the Ace Attorney thing, you might have heard that some of the formerly not localized games just came out on the Switch. So I've been playing those for a while, like since it came out, and I've gotten kind of absorbed in it, so I don't know if I'm going to be doing much Breath of the Wild now.
All right.
But maybe I'll write something for that.
Those are still works in progress that to be excited about. Maybe you'll get me into those games.
Yeah, it's going to be very self-indulgent, so be warned.
I don't know any fanfiction that isn't self-indulgent. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, self-indulgent fics tend to be the best to read, aren't they?
That's true.
Most passionate.
All I've done is write what I want to read, and somehow people like it.
Yeah.
So.
Common opinions, you know?
Also, all I do is write what I need to write for therapy reasons.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I totally
you've
understand that.
got some ideas in the works for Ace Attorney, is that right?
Yeah, well, technically Great Ace Attorney.
Great Ace Attorney. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's good. And I'm sure when Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, you'll jump back on the bandwagon.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you have any plans to participate in any events coming up, like the Link Week or the Link Week or Linktober? Or
I don't usually do those sorts of things, mainly
Okay.
just because it's a lot of pressure, and I like to go at my own pace with my writing.
That's completely fair.
Yeah. But thanks for asking.
You're welcome. You are one of our many guests, and all of our guests are so talented, and I want to make sure not the world isn't listening to this podcast, but the community at large is aware of what's going on. And I should have actually asked all our guests, like, what are you up to next? But I didn't. But I will file that away for later.
All right.
So, is there anything else, you, Quill or Owl, you want to say? Especially Quill, about your fic that we didn't really ask about?
Oh man, I should have brushed up on my own writing
Oh.
for this.
Well, let's give a summary. Starts off with Zelda waking up.
Mm-hmm.
She hears a gunshot.
Yeah.
Intrigue. No, I'm gonna do the whole thing, but
So yeah.
Yeah.
Impa dies. Zelda's trying to figure out how. And then Link comes under suspicion.
Yeah. Also, I shouldn't have, but the entire time I was reading your fic, I was like, I bet Link looks cute in his uniform.
Oh my god. Have you seen my drawing of that?
Can someone draw this, please?
I did actually.
You did?
Before I stopped drawing, yeah.
Did you post it?
Yeah.
Okay, I will link that.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you the link to
in
it.
the description, and so people can see how cute Link's in his uniform. Because I kept thinking about that. Like, as good as your fic was, there were some moments where I'm like, I bet he looks cute. And even when he was in jail and he had the jail clothes on, but then he was a little bit beat up. I'm like, I bet he looks cute. Anyway,
cute.
Okay, we'll end it there for the day.
All right.
I've been Fate. I'm still Fate. I don't know why I said I've been Fate. Thank you for listening. There aren't really any announcements. We'll be back for the next episode. We are interviewing. Who are we interviewing next? No one show me 12. Okay.
Oh my god. Oh wait.
Oh, no one's home.
No one's home.
I always read it as no one show me. It's no one's home.
I used to get that wrong so much.
Okay, well, we'll be back with No One's Home 12 for the next episode, but until then, you can catch up on all of our other episodes. You can read Scarlet Carnations. You can read all the other fics that we've talked about so far. You can like this video and maybe subscribe to this channel to get notifications for when I post, which is every couple weeks, unless something happens. Yeah.
Smash that subscribe button.
Yeah. Please let me know that you like this.
Yes.
Okay, anyway.
It's a very good podcast, I must say.
Okay. Good. I hope you had a good time.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to say bye to our listeners.
Bye.
Bye.